Hi, good evening, Instagram, YouTube, Meetup, all my communities. This is Claire, ATL Shrink. Welcome tonight. If you're on Instagram, I usually post at night, so that's what it is right now. So this is kind of an interesting setup, no? Thought I'd do something a little different. You probably know that I prefer to be more audio than in front of the camera, and not that I mind being in front of the camera, but I get so much benefit out of audio books and audio things, so that's what I choose. So today's Tuesday, and on Instagram I've started doing Trauma Tip Tuesday. And so I thought I would do that a little differently. This is the last Tuesday of the month for October. A lot's been going on this month. So I want to recap some of my Instagram posts, but also just give some information, some tips for trauma, and kind of bring all the thoughts and things that I've had over the month together. So that's what we're going to do, and it's Halloween month. I like Halloween. Obviously this year is going to be different, but I had this towel and I like it, and I just recently bought some marbles, and I really like them. I like the shape of them, the colors, and all of that. And earlier I was washing my marbles. No, I haven't lost my marbles. I have plenty of them. If that's a good therapist joke for you. So I thought I'd just kind of dry my marbles off and talk with you, and hopefully that just kind of gives you something nice to look at. This is certainly not, if you're an ASMR person, this is certainly not ASMR. I am not going to claim being that talented in that kind of arena, but I just thought this was kind of interesting and it seemed fun to me. So that's where we are. So these are some October highlights from Trauma Tip Tuesday. And this came about with a collaboration project with Dr. SaDohl Jones of Atlanta Mental Health and Wellness Center. And we collaborate a lot for what we call Reset, which is resetting life after sexual trauma. And there is a meetup group, and we used to have in-person groups, and so we've tried to bring that online some. So what we decided to start doing is I do Trauma Tip Tuesday, she does Resource Thursday, and we just kind of work together to try to help folks who are on their recovery journey, and that's why we're here. So Dr. SaDohl and I like to call ourselves the resource warriors. And Reset, which is what we call it, resetting life after sexual trauma, is a place for getting to know how to approach using resources kind of beyond therapy, or before therapy, or when you've been through therapy and you want to take a break. Resources are a way to do your own work, for instance. But sometimes if you've got trauma brain going on, we tend to pick resources that are too hard. And when I say resources, I'm talking about podcasts, books, articles. It could be an app that you're using. It might be following someone online and on YouTube or Instagram Patreon, wherever, and trying to get some support or some information. But going through that process, sometimes we pick things that are too hard and it freaks us out. So we're working to help folks find a way to approach resources in a freak out free way. I mean, trauma is about the nervous system and the nervous system getting freaked out. So we try to go the other way and help folks figure out the best match for those resources. So it's October. There's been a lot going on. And the first week of the month was Mental Illness Awareness Week. We've also had breast cancer awareness. And a couple weeks ago, we had Pride here in Atlanta. We've got pumpkins and apple cider season. But obviously, the world is in a very different space right now. So we just wanted to talk some about the connection with mental illness and trauma. And so I wanted to, like I said, do a recap on some of my posts from the month. So the first week of the month, and this isn't going to be terribly long. I would imagine, under 15 minutes. So just in case you're kind of popping in here. So the first week of the month, I talked about how mental illness can be triggered by sexual trauma, but not always. And that's just the truth. Sexual trauma and trauma in general, can be can trigger lots of different things. We have lots of symptoms that come up, right? And it kind of depends on a few factors that were going on at the time. And one key factor that goes on is whether you had support and someone believe you at the time. And especially with children. Now, children, depending on how old they are, they may or may not remember the details of the trauma, right? But their body remembers what they went through. Because trauma is not just emotional, it's psychological and physical. And the physical part is super impactful. And that can, what we might call, therapists in my chair, what we might call being arrested, emotionally arrested at a certain place, right? And so sometimes that happens. So the key thing if trauma is going to move towards mental illness is that the symptoms get intense enough and last long enough to trigger a mental illness, like schizophrenia, and or things that are, maybe more personality oriented. Maybe it's more physically oriented. There's lots of physical ailments that stem from trauma, especially sexual trauma. So I'll talk a little bit about that in week 2. So let's move to there. So week 2, I talked about how do I know it's trauma? How do I know it's trauma? So there's a host of ways that trauma shows up, right? So we have physical symptoms, we have emotional things that happen, we have mental processes. We have what I would say is that beliefs can, how I say it is beliefs can, this isn't exactly correct English, but I say beliefs can be born or get born during a trauma. And so we also have relational impacts, right? So if you have a deep mistrust of people in general because the key people who are supposed to take care of you hurt you in very extreme, deep ways once or over the course of your childhood, chances are good that's going to impact how you relate to people, how you trust them, where you feel safe, right? And then then another area that we have is where we reach for substances. We reach for things like shopping, or our relationship to food is impacted severely. I mean, how many eating disorders stem out of trauma? Quite a few. So many. And there's lots of different types of eating disorders, and disordered eating and disordered relationships to food, right? And other substances. And with substances, we have, using substances to medicate ourselves. We have abusing substances to medicate ourselves. And then we have the dependency factor, where it moves more into an illness, a physical illness that then has to be kind of disconnected in order to heal there. So, when we're looking at how do I know it's trauma and all the different ways that trauma tends to show up, it could show up where you think that something might seem, you might ask the question like, something seems odd about my friend or my partner and how they cope with life. Like, it just doesn't seem, it's not in ways, they don't cope with stress in the ways that I'm used to. And so that could give you indication that there's something going on. Maybe they have a chronic body ailment or something going on physically. That can be a sign. I'll give you an example. So when trauma happens, there is, and you may have heard this, the vagus nerve tends to get tripped. Now the vagus nerve, I don't know if this was the case for you, but when I was growing up, parents might say if you were faking being asleep and that you were playing possum, because possums do that very well. Wow, look at that. I really like that one. Sorry, sidebar. Just a quick one. That's really pretty. So possums, the way that they, what's a good word for that? Trick their prey, trick those animals that are preying on them to think that they're dead, is they trip their own vagus nerve. And so they go limp and seem dead. And, we certainly have a vagus nerve. And a lot of times during trauma, our vagus nerve will get tripped. And if that happens, it's sort of like the system goes offline. And it's possible, I've worked with people who, when their vagus nerve gets tripped and it's kind of in the off position, it can actually affect how they digest food, because it's connected to the whole process. The vagus nerve is connected between the brain and the stomach, actually. That's kind of a loose interpretation, but we'll go with it for these purposes. So how do I know it's trauma? As I talked about in week 2 on Instagram, this is part of it is, what are you seeing? What signs and symptoms are you seeing? Are they physical, emotional, mental, relational, or maybe substance related? So moving on to week 3, and keep in mind that on Thursdays, after I post on Tuesdays about these things, Dr. SaDohl of Atlanta Mental Health and Wellness Center she posts resources related to what I've spoken about on Tuesday. So that might be a good place to find some good stuff too. So week 3, I was talking about how discrimination shows up connected to mental health. And, Mental health is always impacted by discrimination, oppression, racism, sexism, ageism, attacks on sexual identity. And unfortunately, the list of ways that people hate one another goes way beyond that, right? I mean, we have a very long list of isms that happen in our society, in our world, and they get, they affect us deeply, right? So, for example, one of the things I was talking about was intersectionality. And so, for instance, the toll on Black women and the experience of intersectionality can be very dire. Intersectionality, and I'm certainly not the expert. I'm way too light to be really talking about it, but the way that I understand intersectionality, and in talking with friends and colleagues, is when you have sexism and racism, and especially for Black women, this came up specifically in work environments. This is where kind of the Crenshaw talked about it in the work environment, and that's where the I don't want to say concept, but the definition or the connection with intersectionality and sexism and racism came to be discussed more. And when you put those two things together, racism and sexism, it's not just putting those two things together. It's like what I said in my post was it's not just 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 100. It's like it's not the same thing just to say you have sexism and racism kind of on top of each other. It's exponential. It's a very unique experience. I don't have that experience. I know I don't have that experience, but I know people who have. And when you tack on lots of other things on top of that, maybe it's financial difficulties or health problems. It's just so complicated. And so, this connection with mental health and discrimination and how it impacts it connects to all parts of our life. And so when we look at mental health, we have to look at the spectrum. Okay, so we look at the spectrum from our daily self-care all the way over to severe mental illness. And it skips no one. Mental health care, our personal self-care, skips nobody. Everybody is affected by it. If you don't think it's affecting you, just wait till you have a car accident or a health problem in your family or COVID. I mean, hello, right? So, one of the things I was talking about in week 3 was that we have to, it's like we owe it to each other and to the state of our world to talk to each other about our experiences. We're not going to have the same experiences. It's not going to happen the same way. For instance, when an overweight person goes to the doctor, how many times are they looked at and told that if they would just lose weight, that XYZ health problems would go away, without even a blood test to find out whether that's even related? Many times, very often. So these are some of the things that I talked about this month, and I hope are helpful just either to get to you thinking or to support you. And I hope that it was a little bit interesting to kind of watch my marbles here. I think they're beautiful. I found them in an old shop in North Georgia a few weeks ago, and just really, I really like just little things. I like the sounds they make too. So I'm going to wrap up. I do want to let you know that in November, Dr. SaDohl and I will be focusing on holiday survival. We're very aware that the holidays will be different this year, but we want to talk about how to survive the holidays with trauma brain and maybe being around family and boundaries. You know, some people are around their abusers around the holidays because they want to see other family, and that can be very complicated. So we are glad to be your trauma resource warriors. I hope this has been a little bit enjoyable for your evening. Maybe you've been going to sleep and just wanted to tune in and just see what I was going to be talking about. This is the big one. I don't quite know exactly how big this is, what the circumference of that is. Maybe 2.5 inches or so, 2 inches maybe. I'm actually using it for a Halloween costume. So there you go. If you're on YouTube, I'll probably do it on Instagram as well. But I did want to let you know, you probably didn't see my bracelets so much. If you see me regularly, if you know me at all, you know that I wear these bracelets all the time. And Corwin 671 makes these bracelets. And I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do a plug for the woman who created this nail polish, because I met her recently and bought this color, and I am in love with it. So I actually have it sitting here. You obviously know that my subscriber list is super, super short. So there's obviously no endorsements or anything like that in terms of this video being endorsed or anything. But this is candy paints. Isn't that cute? And this color, if you're from Atlanta, you'll know this. Headed to Linux. So it's just a really nice gunmetal gray. But anyway, this is Candy Paints is an Atlanta company, and I just met her not too long ago, and so just wanted to give a shout out to her. So I hope you have a really good rest of the week. Tuesday is a really good day for me usually. A good reconnecting with myself kind of day and getting some work done. I like this little skeleton. I don't know, you might think it's creepy, but like I said, I like Halloween. But anyway, so I hope you have a really good night, and I will see you on Instagram at ATL Shrink. You should also check out Dr. SaDohl's channel, which is not channel, but her profile on Instagram, which is Atlanta MHC. Nope, I'm saying that wrong. Mental Health Wellness Center, MHWC, Atlanta MHWC. I'll put it down below. And if you're needing some support, you can, and you're on meetup.com, you can go check out the Reset community, and we'll be posting some more videos over there. All right. Thank you so much. Have a good night.